Pat, and thanks to all of you who have been hanging in here with us. If you've been on since we started this webinar at 11:30 a.m., why don't you just tell me in the question box? I'd love to hear if we have any folks who have been with us for the entire time. A few housekeeping items for you if you are joining us new at the top of the half hour. This is the Online Servant Leadership Summit, and we have the hashtag SLS2015. If you're tweeting live, we would love to have you tweet the thoughts that are coming from Cheryl and Pat in this next half hour. And oh my goodness, there are a lot of people who have been here the whole time. It's just scrolling faster than you can imagine, and thanks to all of you for hanging in there with us. And I'm really thrilled for this last conversation. Did anybody notice it's all women on the line right now? So anyhow, that's fun. So I want to, again, thank my co-host today, Karin Hurt, the founder and CEO of Let's Grow Leaders and an awesome keynote speaker. And her book, Winning Well, is coming in 2016. I think I keep saying 2015 for everything. I'm just not ready for the new year. Again, we have with us Cheryl Bachelder. She's the CEO of Popeyes and the author of Dare to Serve. And we have Pat. And Pat, I'm afraid of getting your last name wrong, so I'm going to let you say your last name. But Pat is the CEO of the Robert K. Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. And for those of you who are not familiar with the center, it was founded in 1964 by Robert Greenleaf, and the center advances the philosophy and practice of servant leadership. Pat joined the center just in the past year or so after having a career as an executive in the corporate world, and maybe we'll hear more about that on this call. So I'm going to turn this over now to Karin, who will be talking with Pat and Cheryl, and I'll be back with you again at the end of the half hour. Thanks, ladies. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Oh, I want really fast. I want to give another shout out to the people who have had their groups. In Touch Ministries has a group that's been on since the beginning of the webinar. The U.S. EPA also has been on since the beginning of the webinar, and there's a group with Soulology that I saw commenting earlier, and their group has been on the whole time. The group at Apple on the whole time. So thanks to those of you in organizations who are investing in your people to learn about servant leadership with us today.
Great. So Robert Greenleaf created the BEST test. And could you explain the BEST test to our listeners?
Sure, Karin. And I'll pronounce my last name for Becky. It's Falotico. And I can understand why you choose not to try it. Because even when I go to the airport and they're looking for somebody to match that name to do the baggage check, they just say, Miss Pat? So I respond. So when Robert Greenleaf wrote the essay, The Servant as Leader, he gave us the BEST test in that very first publication. And what he said is the BEST test, and I heard John say this earlier when he was talking with Cheryl, is, do people grow? Do they grow as persons while they're being served? And he talked about that in terms of healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to be servants. So he gave us a pretty hard bar to reach consistently as a servant leader.
Terrific. Thank you. So I'm curious, have you always led this way, or has this been an evolution throughout your careers?
Well, I'll start by saying it was definitely an evolution and then eventually a revolution in my thinking. I used to joke when I was young that my leadership philosophy was think like a man, act like a lady, and work like a dog. People always laugh, but I now look back on that as a pretty superficial response. But after some school of hard knocks in leadership roles, I think I started taking more seriously my approach to leadership and started reading and studying the approaches that what I believe to be the best path to performance. Similar to Matt on the last half hour, I didn't really become highly convicted about servant leadership till I personally had faced failure in the marketplace. Getting fired from a pretty high-profile job that I thought was going to be my capstone of my career. That humbling experience led me to explore a humble approach to leadership, which doesn't mean doormat. It simply means thinking of others as more significant.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. How about Pat? How about you?
Yeah, I appreciated Cheryl's comments as well as Matt's in facing a situation to evaluate. Quite honestly, I grew up in a command and control culture. In corporate America, that's the way we learned to manage, not necessarily to lead, but to manage people and to get what you needed to get out of people. I think over the course of my career, actually the one very early epiphany came when my husband was asking me a question about my day. And I was saying, well, I was really frustrated. I wasn't getting what I needed out of my people. And I said, he just won't do it the right way. And my husband said, well, what's the right way? I said, well, of course, it's my way. And he said, yeah, maybe not. So sometimes out of not the most obvious places, you get a flash of the obvious. And I learned that the best way to get things out of people, get the best performance out of people, was really to understand what was important to them and help them achieve that.
Great. Thank you. So what do you see as the biggest barriers to serving well?
Ourselves.
Yes.
There is, I've come to really think that our thinking around the word humility really trips us up in this case. As I was saying a couple minutes ago, most of us think a humble leader would be a soft-spoken, no opinions, no ambitions person who just went around giving everybody hugs. And that is not the definition of servant leadership. We just heard Pat talk about the test that Greenleaf gave us. I actually do a slight paraphrase on that, but the question I ask is, are the people better off today, right now, because of my leadership? And if they're not, what's in the way of that? What's in the way of that? That idea that all day long you might ask, how does your decision impact others, is a powerful game-changing thing, and many times it changes my decision. If I'm in a room with angry franchisees who don't think we're doing something right, my first response might be, well, the heck with you, I'm going to get angry too. But if I can catch myself and say, are the people better off because of my leadership, I might think to say, tell me more. What's the problem? How can we do a better job? And listen first and seek to understand before having that, leader as king kind of response that we are inclined to have. We're human beings. We're inclined to think of ourselves first.
Nice. Thank you.
The piece that I would add to that is we are all so busy now, and we've got, in many cases, in Cheryl's world, in the world I used to be in, quarterly objectives where there is a scorecard that is out there, and we've got to meet that scorecard. So we are running. We're running so fast that just to take the time to stop and instead of tell, teach. Instead of giving fast, off-the-cuff reactions, really question to understand. And I think more and more we learn that if we teach, if we enable, if we help people grow, we're going to be a heck of a lot more productive at the end of the day than if we just constantly be handing out instructions to people. They never learn that way. They have to come back for the instruction again, and productivity goes through the floor. So I think at the end of the day, it's just understanding that if we slow down and take 2 steps back, we're going to make many, many giant leaps forward.
Terrific. Pat, on the screen here, for those of us who, if you can see the slides, you've got this concentric circle model. I'm curious, can you walk us through this, what this is all about?
Well, I actually heard many of your speakers talking about this. In fact, Matt was stressing some of that just earlier. It's the self-awareness. It's the empathy. These are some of the words that Greenleaf gave us, and you've seen them show up in 10 attributes and 7 pillars and very many different manifestations. But when we talk to folks, we're talking about, the idea of a servant leader, first and foremost, to strengthen themselves, then to build those relationships with others, and then their responsibility from an organizational perspective. And that's the set of ideas that we put forward here when we have some conversations. One of the things we talked about might be interesting to know is where are we in terms of working on these things. Matt talked about it a little bit ago, the mindfulness and being self-aware and being able to train himself every day. I love the self-awareness point because what Greenleaf told us about self-awareness is that it's not enough just to know about yourself, but you need to know about the impact you're having on others. You can't change each other, but you need to be able to stretch enough so that you can connect. And I think that is the power of a model like this that reminds us, doesn't teach us, it reminds us that these are important elements in all the relationships we have. And I think, Karin, we did come up with one poll. Okay. So you all have been listening for all of these hours, and think about what is the one thing that you need to do to grow as a servant leader. What would be the top of your list? And if you can pick one, that would be terrific. We'll gather that from the group.
And I'm unmuting for a moment because I can see the results of the poll coming in. I don't know that Karin can. So thanks to you who are answering. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. The highest priority attribute I must strengthen to grow as a servant leadership is, and you have the chance to select self-awareness, listening, persuading, empathy, or foresight. Lots of answers coming in. I think did everybody's camera disappear while we're doing the poll?
Yeah, Becky, mine did too.
Yeah, so we will all come. Yeah, when I close the poll, we'll all come back on camera.
Okay, good.
It looks like about half of our participants have voted. I'm going to give just a few more seconds, and then we can show those results.
There we are.
Let's take a look at those results together. Pat, can you see them?
I can see them.
I would love to hear your comments on those results.
So with the groups that I have worked with, most of the time I ask them to verbalize the one that they're going to go work on most. And the winner is typically the winner today, listening. 27% of our folks out here saying listening is something we have to work on. I know I have to work on it. There's lots of different programs that we can use, but I just think it's one of those things that we have to remind ourselves to take a break, to take a step away from the computer, put the technology down, and just listen, not judge, ask good questions, and as Greenleaf told us, practice silence.
Thanks, Pat. Cameras and our slides are both back.
Yes. Great. So my final question for you is, what continues to compel and motivate you to serve others?
For me, it's become just a heartfelt passion that this is a better leadership approach, better for the people, better for the enterprise, and better for performance. And once you come to that conviction, you're a convert and you become an evangelist. And I want to be an evangelist to help the next generation of leaders lead more effectively than my own cohort did. I grew up in the age of leaders who embarrassed me, to be frank, whose leadership has been self-absorbed, and the outcomes have been poor for the people and for the enterprise, whether it was just kind of bad, or whether it was all the way to fraud and some very serious bad behavior. And so I just get excited to come to work in the morning thinking I'm just one person in one position, but I want to be on the team of people developing a better cohort of next generation leaders.
Well, it definitely comes through. You do sound and feel like someone who with a deep conviction in this. Appreciate all you're doing, and you.
I think one of the things that when I first read Greenleaf's book, he talked about that there's a compact between the servant leader and those that they serve, and they come together in this idea of healing. The relationship of two people, the servant leader and those that they serve, are meeting each other's needs. And the leader is the servant at one point and the served in the same relationship. I think we all grow tremendously through relationships that are based on commitment to others.
Cool. Okay, thank you so much. Becky, we're ready to open it up for some final questions.
Okay, I have to get all the buttons and unmute and turn the camera back on. Thank you so much, Karin. We have several questions that are coming in, and I love this one from Christy. She's wondering if the two of you could comment on what it looks like to think of others above ourselves without becoming a doormat. And Christy would love some examples of what this looks like in practice, rather than in theory.
Well, I'll start with some examples. You know, some will be simple, some may be more conceptual, but one question you might ask is how much time do I personally dedicate to getting to know my team members and coaching them effectively? I spend 30% of my week in one-on-one coaching with my direct reports. Every time I've said that out loud in a public place, I get asked, how on earth do you find the time to do that? And my question is, how on earth could I lead without spending that time to know and grow my team members? Another specific would be, you know, everybody worries about whether they're going to get a pay raise this year. How long have you spent working on whether your people should get a pay raise this year? And are you serving them well in that respect? Are you making sure that they're competitively compensated? And are you sticking your neck out for your people and ensuring that you're creating a great place for them to work? And then the other one I give that's specific is, are you spending enough time saying encouraging words? We heard earlier today, Mark Miller said he writes 250 thank you notes a year. He is an encourager. He is a person that says thank you. And his servant leadership is evidenced in his actions. So there's just a few specific examples.
Thanks, Cheryl. Pat, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that we have a misconception of is that a servant leader doesn't expect results and will take on all of the burdens of everyone on the team and kind of take that monkey and be responsible for it. But very clearly, we expect great results from people. We love the people, but sometimes we don't love their results. And I think the one way that you can continue to be a servant leader is to give good feedback around what's going on. Cheryl said the positives as well as the negatives, because in some cases I can't hear if the only time you're giving me feedback is negative feedback. So I can say thank you, because then later when I have to tell you, Becky, this was really great, but this one thing could have been better, you're going to hear it better. So expect results, expect great outcomes, but be willing to help.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So I'm trying to scroll through. We had so many questions come in throughout the course of the hour. If you're still on the line, and there are so many of you still on the line, and you have questions that you asked earlier, but I didn't have the chance to ask our guests, I would invite you to retype those. The shorter the better. When I get a big long paragraph, it's harder to wade through and share it in the moment. So I want to invite folks to go ahead and send those questions in as we're wrapping up this hour together. And I did have some questions that came in via email prior to our event, and perhaps I can try some of those for you. Here's a question about collaboration. So how can a servant leader best inspire others?
I think
the first thing is, go ahead.
I think it's what we've heard from so many of your guests today is the role modeling. If you're going to expect collaboration, then learn to collaborate. And really, I have had the great opportunity to learn from Ken Jennings' team about ways to really facilitate a great collaborative experience with large groups, even by a conference call, where you really invite everyone to say their piece around the table so everyone is heard. And being able to ask each other questions. I mean, I think you've got to role model it, you've got to practice it, and people will begin to mirror the good behaviors.
Cheryl?
I think we also have to wrestle with the fact that our culture does not teach collaboration. Our culture teaches what we say in colloquial language, every man for himself. So this is a big mind shift change for our employees, and we've got to talk about the value of this changed behavior of checking in with others to see if they have input, if they can help, if they can contribute to a decision. Every book that's been written about decision making says collaboration makes them better and more into practice. When we bring new employees into Popeyes, this is their number one stumbling block, because they're so well trained to do things on their own by themselves with no help that they think it's weird when someone reaches out to them and says, could I help? Here's a question you might want to look at. Here's something you might want to challenge. And they're like, why are you talking? So we need to acknowledge that collaboration is not deep-rooted in our leadership teaching, and really take the steps to change the hearts and minds of our people.
Thanks. So here's an interesting question for you. Michael is wondering if it's possible to be an effective servant leader under the thumb of oppressive command and control leaders, and if so, how?
Well, I'm a large company person. I've grown up in large companies, so has Pat. And they've traditionally been command and control environments, so your only path was to be in that environment. And so I would tell you that every small team in a large organization has a chance to demonstrate a better leadership approach and make the organization curious about what you're up to and why it's producing such outstanding results. I'm confident that servant leadership will lead your team to performance that makes others curious.
And Cheryl, I love what you said earlier about this, that you're creating a microculture within your organization. I mean, as you said, we've all lived ways you become the buffer for your team, almost to the point that you're trying to build a little cocoon around them to say, okay, I understand all the crazy that's going on around me, but here we're going to try to behave differently. And I remember a conversation I had once with a leader of mine who said I was just too nice. And I said, well, I didn't know that nice was a problem, but that was not an excuse for not accepting good results from my team. So you can be nice, you can bring out the best in people, but you have to, in some cases, really shield them from the culture that's around them.
Well, and you find some people in 8 of the world's religions which simply says treat others like you'd like to be treated, and it's an amazing and rewarding practice. And if you teach that to your leaders, you will be setting them up to create these small microcultures that produce superior results as well.
Thanks so much. That is very helpful. Kevin is wondering how you can motivate employees to invest in themselves as leaders.
Certainly, developing leaders is a shared responsibility. When we do development plans here at Popeyes, the individual writes the first draft. You must encourage people to own their development, to point out the growth areas they see as having the biggest potential, and to ask for the support of their supervisor in helping them get to those goals. There's no success in developing a person that doesn't want to be developed. And so it's very much a mutual enterprise that we do together. And I've never seen a fast-growing, talented leader who wasn't heavily invested themselves in their own growth.
Thanks, Cheryl.
The other piece is we need to remind people that they're leaders every day. They have the opportunity to lead every day. They may not choose to be organizational leaders. They may not choose to have organizational power, but they have the ability to lead and influence and help others every day. And I think that that's a great way of developing people who can take on structural responsibility later on, is to give them the opportunity to lead a project, a small work group, even an volunteer activity for the team. Something that gives them leadership opportunity and lets them work with it in somewhat of a penalty-free environment.
That's very helpful.
It's really true. If your supervisors are looking for you to demonstrate influence, and influence doesn't require people working for you. So If you think of leadership as influence, that is your opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, we are coming to the end of an amazing 3 hours of learning, and because the two of you are the last ladies standing, I would love to have a chance for you to summarize any key takeaways that you each have from participating in today's event as we wrap up this amazing experience together today. Pat, would you like to perhaps go first?
Well, sure. I'd like to, as Matt did earlier, thank you both, Becky and Karin, for a wonderful event today. I cannot believe 3 hours of webinar, that personal stamina. And while we all flipped in and out here, you were there through the whole thing, as well as all of the folks who participated on the line. The threads were so clear in terms of the focus on others. Every time I get the opportunity to listen and learn from others, I walk away inspired and uplifted, and you've done that once again for me, so thank you.
My pleasure. Cheryl, any parting thoughts? What actions do we want to hear or see these listeners who have been participating today take in their organizations?
So I'm pretty sure if you're on this webinar today and have invested this kind of time, I'm pretty sure you're already an advocate for servant leadership. So my challenge to you is to go out and create more advocates. I used a quote earlier today, leaders are made by other leaders who go on to make more leaders, and would you please challenge yourselves to bring more people with you on this journey and show them the real power lies in service to others.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I'm going to flip to our last slide as a review of some of the amazing authors that we've talked with today. We started our morning with Ken Blanchard and Ken Jennings. Ken Blanchard is the author of a most recent title that I have here, Collaboration Begins With You. Also, we mentioned the new 1 Minute Manager. Ken Jennings is a co-author with John Stalwart on The Serving Leader, and we heard from both of those authors during today's event. I'm going to remind you of Cheryl's book, Dare to Serve, and Mark Miller, who spent an hour with us earlier today. Chestnut Checkers is his most recent title. And then Matt Tenney, new dad, who joined us, and his first book that's already out and available on this topic is Serve to Be Great. I realized about 2 hours into the event that when I hit record, it didn't record. So we have recordings of these last two conversations, and I'm going to be reaching out to all of our participants to see if there's any way to re-record the first 4 segments of our day. So many things went well today, and that is not one of them. But I think the thing that went the best is just the value that each of the authors and experts chose to bring, and the energy and wisdom and thoughtfulness. And so thanks to all of you, and thanks, Karin, for joining me as a co-host today.
Thanks
Have
so
a
much.
wonderful day, and we all look forward to seeing you on future events.
Thank you.